You may have heard the story of the Pacer train, operating around the United Kingdom, where a bankrupt bus manufacturer took a bus body and attached it to the frame of a freight wagon and said, "Good enough." But Germany took the concept of a railroad bus a bit further, and some might even say too far. Following World War II, most of Europe was bankrupt, and Germany especially was in ruins. Most of its railway network was destroyed, but Germany did have one advantage over the rest of Europe. Germany had an extensive network of highways, something the rest of Europe was severely lacking at the time. And while the network was destroyed somewhat in the war, it was much cheaper for Germany to rebuild. This, combined with the overall shift from rail to road that was happening at the time, meant that designs for new transportation systems in Germany were needed. Out of this came the railroad bus, which is different from a rail bus. A rail bus was a single car designed to carry passengers on the rails. A railroad bus is a vehicle that is designed to carry passengers on road as well as rail, and be able to interchange between each mode of transport. A German company with the name I am unable to pronounce decided that this concept was one they wanted to pursue. They designed a vehicle which, while on the road, looked like a normal bus. It had an 118 horsepower motor, a top speed of 50 miles per hour, and space for 87 passengers, both sitting and standing. But the vehicle could also drive on rails, where it had a top speed of 75 miles per hour. Thus, the vehicle had features for both road and rail operations. Its railroad operations were a bit unique. You're probably thinking that the bus has some sort of wheels that fold down to allow it to drive on rails, but it doesn't. The bus would drive on the road to a changeover point, where a team of people would jack up the bus and slide railroad trucks underneath, then lower the bus back on top of them. This process would take 10 minutes each time the bus wanted to change operation from road to rail. As for routes the bus was meant to operate on, there weren't many from the start. There were few routes where a change from road to rail was necessary, and even fewer where a change would save time, especially when it would take 10 minutes. That did not stop the bus from being tried on a few routes around Germany starting in 1953, but it wasn't popular. There just didn't seem to be any benefit from switching from rail to road in the middle of a journey, especially in the 50s and 60s when traffic was low and it was faster to just drive the whole way. Ultimately, this was realized, as while 50 vehicles were ordered, only 15 were ever run on the rails, with the rest just running on roads. On most routes, the rail portions were discontinued in 1955, but the most popular route did keep running, albeit only twice a day until 1967, and just like that, the services were discontinued. This concept has been tried a few times since then in a few countries around the world, but none of them ever saw passengers. Some of the more modern solutions reduced the amount of time it would take to switch from road operation to rail, but ultimately, this did not make the design any more usable or successful. Something similar to this design, however, does exist today. In some cities, they use guided buses, which run in mixed traffic for most of the trip, but when they reach a busy section of the route, typically through a dense part of the city, they drive on a guideway. Initially, these were just dedicated roads for buses that were created to prevent buses from being stuck in traffic. But in some cities, they were fitted with guides, allowing operators to not have to worry about steering. This reduces operator fatigue. In the few cities that have adopted this concept, it has been a success, with some systems being in operation for over 20 years and have been expanded and kept up to date into the modern era. The German rail bus was a way to combine road and rail transport into one vehicle. It was definitely not a successful way to achieve this, but it definitely was an interesting and unique one. Be sure to subscribe for more.